What's up guys, Brian Elliott here, and today I'm going to be talking about the Helios 44-2 in relation to narrative filmmakers. This is a wonderful little lens you can get for about $50 to $100 on eBay, and it has a lot of character. It was built in Russia in the 70s and 80s, and it's an f2 58mm lens. Right now I'm on the Sigma Art 50mm at f2, so that we can do a lens comparison that is equal and even without too many different variables going on. And I do want to apologize if you see me looking off this way. I have a monitor right here so I can make sure that I'm pointing at the right things and that I'm in focus and all that good stuff. Let's go ahead and just talk about the image, and you're going to see some samples on the screen throughout this video as well. When we compare it to something like the Sigma Art 50mm, this lens tends to be very clean, very clinical, very soft, whereas the Helios, this bad boy right here, tends to be less so. You tend to get a lot more character in the background blur rather than very smooth, non-distracting, clinical, with fairly round bokeh balls like you can see right there above my head. You know, it's relatively round, relatively non-distracting. So the thing that the Helios is most known for is the swirly bokeh that it creates. And that's not going to be as apparent indoors as outdoors, because it really shines if you can get some leaves, some trees, some different interesting shapes going on that can really accentuate the swirly bokeh effect. And that's really where this lens absolutely excels and looks the most beautiful. Now, when it comes to the sharpness of the Helios, it's not going to be as sharp, especially not across the entire frame, the way that something like the Sigma Art is. So what I'm gonna do now is go ahead and switch over to the Helios for the rest of the review so that you can see in this kind of scenario what it looks like. The focal distance is gonna get a little bit tighter on me. I do apologize for that. I can't move the camera back in the space that I've got. So it's just gonna be a little bit tighter, but we should still be able to see and compare a lot of the differences. So let's switch over. So I'm going to try and keep kind of right here because the Helios is a fully manual lens. So, you know, if I'm moving back and forth, the Sony's great autofocus is not going to help me one bit. But I feel like for narrative filmmaking, a manual lens is better most of the time. You want to be able to control what's in focus, what your audience is paying attention to, and not have the camera jumping back and forth, or worse, like pulsing, or something really distracting and weird that takes away from your story. But in terms of the image characteristics, you're not necessarily going to see huge differences in here, but you can see a little bit of maybe the harder lines of the out of focus background. You can see a little bit of the different shape of the bokeh ball, and you maybe can see that my skin is just a little bit softer than on the Sigma. Now, either lens you obviously can attach a black pro mist to and get an even softer look. That's kind of the ultimate soft image in a pleasing way with the black pro mist and the 58mm. So if you're gonna do like a real tight close-ups on someone, you can really kind of make things look a little softer, a little prettier with a combination of the Helios and a black pro mist. Let's go ahead and talk about flares. I'm gonna go ahead and use my trusty little iPhone here. Turn on the iPhone. As we can see, we get a lot of flaring here, which I actually really like. We can kind of play with some different looks. Really nice, really cool looking, nice flare here. Now, if you're not into flares, I will tell you, this is not the lens for you. This is not a well-controlled lens flare type of lens. These lens flares are prominent, especially if you get a real big bright light source like the sun hitting the lens just right, man, it's gonna make everything washed out. And this can be a really cool look if that's the look you're going for. But again, if you're not into that, this might not be the right lens for you. All right, so now let's talk about the usability of this lens for narrative filmmaking. I would say it's a very usable, very serviceable manual focus lens. The focus ring feels pretty good. It's not the longest focus throw. It's also not horribly short. For example, I am all the way to infinity and turning it back, turning it back, turning it back. Now I'm all the way to its close focusing distance, which happens to be right here. And if we kind of go somewhere in there, boom, there I am. So let's go ahead and talk about the versatility of this lens. At 58 millimeters, it's not super telephoto, it's not wide by any means. If you're gonna be shooting in a lot of really small spaces, it's not gonna be the lens for you. As we can see, I'm, maybe like 3 feet away from the lens. I can't quite touch it, and I have to lean forward. Now I can touch it. So if I'm within arm's reach, this is what you're getting. You're getting a really tight face close-up. So that might not be ideal if you're shooting a lot indoors, in smaller spaces, like in a home or something. It may not be the lens for you. If a lot of your films are taking place outdoors or in larger spaces where you have room to step back from your actors to get those wider shots, you're going to be in good shape with this lens. As I mentioned at the top of this review, this is a $50 to $100 lens on eBay, so it's very affordable. It's great if you're just starting out and you want to be able to shoot some really interesting, cool looking shots. Adapters for various cameras run anywhere from like 10 to 20 bucks because it's just a manual adapter. You don't need any electronics, so it's not going to be expensive like some adapters. My final verdict is hugely positive on this lens as a narrative filmmaking lens. It gives a really interesting, unique look. If you've got the space to be able to back up, it's absolutely wonderful. Even if it was a more expensive lens, I'd still be very interested in having it in my collection, just because it creates such a special, unique look, and it really adds an extra level of character that something like the Sigma Art just doesn't. I hope that you guys enjoyed this little look into the Helios from a filmmaker's perspective. If you did, make sure to hit the like button and consider subscribing for more filmmaking content, and I'll catch all of you in the next one.